Chelsea. I'm here with Finnriver Farm and Cidery. We are a cidery based just outside of Port Townsend in Chimacum, Washington. And I am here to share some of our cider and dessert wines with you. We brought, as you can see, a lot of different delicious ciders to share. We have probably, if you're familiar with Finnriver, our black currant cider is probably the one you're most likely to see out in the world. This is a foundation of organic Washington grown apples finished with fresh black currant juice. It's juicy and tart. It's become our kind of flagship cider. But I brought a bunch of other stuff that you might not have seen in the world besides the black currant.
Great. So Chelsea, tell us how long Finnriver's been around.
So we have been making cider since 2010. 2009. So we're in our 11th year of cider making. So we started on this very small plot of land in Chimacum and have been able to have about 50 acres that we farm on our own. We grow a handful of our own heirloom cider, apple, and pear trees. We also lease the land and work with a number of local nonprofits. We work with the organic Cider Line that does seed research on our land, and Essential Blooms, which is a flower company that does flower growing. We work with a lot of cool other groups on our land as well.
Wonderful. Well, pick up a few of these wonderful ciders and tell us.
Absolutely. So I brought a lot, as you can see. Our ciders kind of fall into a number of different families. So that black currant I was talking about, that's our contemporary cider line. We also have the same apple foundation, the black currant, the pear, and the habanero. Same apple base, but then we're infusing it with different fruit. So the pear has fresh pear juice, so it has this really beautiful mild sweetness. The habanero is made in partnership with Tonamaker Farms. They grow habaneros especially for us. So this has a mild kick to it. Not set your mouth on fire spicy, more of a kind of back of your throat, slow burn. Then we have our traditional ciders down here. This is where we get to borrow from different cider making traditions around the world. So the farmstead here is kind of our most traditional, straightforward English style cider. We partner here with a handful of orchardists up and down the Olympic Peninsula. So this is a very western centric fantastic apple, beginning, middle, and end. Mild sweetness, but not over sweet. Then we've got our oaken apple, which is a French style cider. This one is aged in rye whiskey barrels, so it has a drier finish. You get some of that oak influence. And then the Cidery, my personal favorite. This is a Spanish style dry cider. So this one we haven't bottled in almost 2 years, and we just got it back in the bottles about 2 weeks ago. It's super dry. It almost has a light sour characteristic to it, and very lightly carbonated, whereas the rest have a little more bubble to them. So each one kind of, we like to say we make enough cider that there's something for everybody. Then we also have these guys down here. I want to talk a little bit about our saffron cream. So you see this label here. This is our crew selection series. Basically, I like to say this is where our cider making crew gets to get kind of creative and weird. And weird in the best possible way. Basically, I like to say where we, kind of throw something at the wall and see what sticks. It's also part of the proceeds for all of our crew selections bottles go to a bonus program for our cider makers, which is a cool added incentive. The saffron cream is, I think, a really cool example of that project. This one's infused with saffron, star anise, and fennel, and then finished with lactose. So kind of like a milk stout. It's a tradition frequently used in beer making, but not a lot in cider. So it ends up having this kind of absinthe quality, really herbaceous, round, almost some hints of kind of savoriness to it, but with a really soft finish. So that's kind of a cool.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
It's delightful.
I'm getting thirsty.
And then in that same series, we also have our flutes, which is a cranberry sour. So made in the style of a Berliner Weiss, a German beer. It has this cranberry tinge to it, a little bit of a soft sour in the finish. So again, those are ones that you never find outside of farmers markets or at the tasting room, and available now.
Excellent.
So yeah, a really cool kind of opportunity to see what our cider makers are cooking up.
Well, and I love that you're incentivizing your cider makers. That's just a
Yeah.
really outrageous thing to be doing.
Well, and we really want to embrace the kind of spirit of creativity that's part of cider making. You know, we have our flagships that we make all the time, but we also want to see, like, somebody might just be like, I don't know, this might be really tasty. Let's try it out. Let's see if it works. And honestly, some of, I think, our best received ciders have come out of that process, which is, I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's super fun.
Absolutely.
And then over here, I want to talk about our orchard series. So all of these beautiful bottles with these different birds on them, we sometimes call them our flights of fermentation, in that they all have different lovely birds on the labels. So these ciders are primarily focusing on either apples from our orchard personally or from sister orchards on the peninsula. So more like an estate series wine. This is our estate series cider. Each one super different from one another. The Perry just won us a platinum award from Sip Magazine, which is pretty exciting. It's their highest award. This is made with 100% Perry pears. So there's no apple in it. It's one of the only things I brought today that doesn't have apple. Super juicy, very perry, but quite dry at the finish. It almost has some sort of grapefruit overtones to it. We're using a pretty young blend of pears, and it has this just luscious kind of bite to it in the finish.
Wow, sounds lovely.
The Blue Hue is a blend of Virginia Hughes crab apples and just a touch of blueberry. It drinks kind of champagne-y, really bright, dry, and then you get this lovely floral note from the blueberry in the finish. The Black Oak. This is the 2019 Black Oak, so we just bottled this guy. It's a blend of black currant wine and apple that we ferment separately, but then blend and age together for almost a year. So it has this kind of Pinot Noir, Beaujolais character to it, like really rich fruit, but light body, lovely with a meal. Sort of, in general, this whole lineup is meant to show that you can serve and drink cider like you would a wine. You know, cider doesn't have to be relegated to sort of second tier drinking. These are definitely refined enough.
So something like this black oak that we're talking about, what would I serve that with? What's on the dinner plate that night?
It's got really beautiful acidity, so I think something that has some kind of creaminess to it. Think, you know, like a baked pasta, something sort of cream-based, I think would be especially delicious, but also would be great with, say, a grilled steak. Like red meat, for sure. Red meat or something creamy. I think the acidity that lies in that bottle would be a great pairing for something rich, where this acidity can kind of cut through.
Wow, that's good to know, because cider kind of is traditionally a happy hour drink or an after drink, so
yes, and
lovely to know that.
This is our opportunity to show that, you know, you can slide into some other areas. The Fire Barrel here is one of our most most established ciders. We've been making it for a really long time. It comes from cider maker Drew Zimmerman, who used to make cider out in the Skagit Valley, and he made this really beautiful rye whiskey barrel-aged cider, and he decided to sell his acreage to us. Our cider makers had a relationship with him, and we bought all of his trees, and in one day, from the Skagit to the peninsula, I think it was something like 500 trees. We transported and transplanted them all in one day, and now we've continued his tradition. So it's a cider aged in rye whiskey barrels. It has this really beautiful, light, smoky, kind of tannic quality to it. Again, really lovely with something smoked or grilled, something that kind of mirrors the smokiness and the cider. Golden Russet is one of my personal favorites. This is using 100% russeted apples, which are a kind of thin-skinned, high-acid apple, big kind of Sauv Blanc characteristics to it. The kind of acidity that sort of gets you in the molars. You get almost that kind of citrus nose to it. Really bright, really crisp, light bubble to it. It's just a delightful, kind of easy drinking cider. And then lastly, our Sojourn. This is a wild fermented French style cider. So we don't do a lot of wild fermented ciders. They can be very temperamental. But this one turned out just really beautifully. It has that kind of rustic farmhouse apple characteristic to it. We've left it partially unfiltered, so it's got a light haziness to it as well. So it has more of that kind of farmhouse scrumpy apple to it, which is a really fun, especially these tend to be a little more refined. This one's definitely more rustic.
Feels like you just went out and crushed them and you brought it in and poured it and just started drinking it.
Northwest. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And then I would be remiss if I neglected to talk about our brandy wines. So a lot of people know that we make cider, which, as I've been talking about, we make a lot of cider. But our brandy wines can sometimes be kind of the unsung hero of our lineup. So as you can see, lots of different varieties. What the brandy wines are, it's a low wine or fruit wine. So whatever the fruit on the label, the library here is a red currant. So red currant, black currant, raspberry, blueberry, pear, and chai. The chai uses the pear as the foundation. But so we take that fruit and we ferment it to only about a 4% wine. So a lot of that residual sugar is left behind. Then we fortify with apple brandy and then lightly back sweeten. So these are going to be a little bit syrupy, you can see, kind of like a cordial or an ice wine or dessert wine. They're in that same kind of general family. Lots of folks like to drink these on their own as like an after dinner sipper. I like to mix with them. So say add them to champagne, pour them over ice, use them in a cocktail, or even like one of my go-tos is like add a little splash to some soda water for like a little like low ABV spritzer. They're super versatile. Both the pear and the chai can kind of go hot or cold, which I think is really fun, especially in these colder months. Like both of them are great in say a hot toddy, or even just some like black tea. Add them to some eggnog. If you're an eggnog.
Wow.
I mean, they're super versatile, and the cool thing is because they're on the sweet side, a little goes a long way, and they're shelf stable. So even once the bottle's open, you don't have to worry about drinking the whole bottle in one sitting. These will last quite some time.
Probably not very long at my house, but maybe a little longer at somebody else's.
That's fair. And then lastly, these guys down here are our port style wines. So whereas the tall skinny bottles are on the sweet side, these are going to be a little less sweet. So we have a blackberry port and an apple port. Again, those are fruit wines fortified with apple brandy, except we're not sweetening after the fact, we're barrel aging. So my general kind of go-to is I want to mix with these. I want to drink these guys on their own as a little after-dinner sipper. They're all 18.5%, so they have a little backbone to them.
Right.
Sure. I say, like, the blackberry is just delicious, lushy, jammy, juicy. The apple has really beautiful kind of apple sweetness in the front, but drier in the finish. I generally say, especially with the apple, you can drink it on its own, but it's also delicious to cook with. Like any recipe that calls for a finishing splash of, port, sherry, Madeira, you can use the apple as well. And then very last but not least,
yes, pick that beauty out.
Bottle
Look
of
at
Pommeau
that.
on the end. So the Pommeau is different than anybody else on the table. This is a blend of fresh pressed apple juice and apple brandy, blended and then aged for about 2 years. So this sees more age than anybody else on the table. And Pommeaus come from a French tradition of lacing apple juice with a bit of apple brandy so it wouldn't ferment over the winter. Essentially, in France, you have a tradition of you press all your apples in the fall. Some of them are set aside to make brandy, some of them are set aside to make cider, and then some of them you just want some apple juice. But you have to, if you just set the juice out, it's going to start to ferment. So you would lace it with a little bit of brandy from last year to halt fermentation. And that would just be stored in a barrel for your family to drink, regular apple juice throughout the year. Well, that became more of a tradition, like, oh, that brandy with no juice tastes pretty delicious. So that's where the sort of tradition of Pommeaus come from. So it's fresh juice, fortified with brandy, and then aged in a barrel. So it has this really lovely, juicy, you get all those, like, caramelized apple flavors. So it drinks like an apple brandy, but without the kind of brandy burn in the finish, because it's just 18.5%, so not quite as strong as a full fruit apple brandy. delicious on its own, great in an old-fashioned, lightly heated, or on the rocks with a lemon twist. Like, really, you can't go wrong with the pomelo.
Wow.
Delicious.
Sounds absolutely delicious.
It's pretty great. Man, what did I not talk about?
So you're out on the peninsula,
Yes.
on the Olympic Peninsula, and do you have tasting room hours? Are you open? How are you working right now?
We do. So our tasting room is currently open Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 12 to 6. We do benefit from the fact that it's primarily outdoors. And we have a covered pavilion and heat lamps, so we're able to kind of facilitate, folks still coming out and enjoying the area while being safely, distanced and whatnot. We've been working really hard to make sure that folks can still come out and still feel, safe and distanced, and it's going really well. As the weather turns, we're definitely telling people, make sure to come bundled up. But I feel like we're Pacific Northwesterners. Like, we got coats on. We had some folks last week who had sleeping bags in the car, and they just kind of wore their sleeping bags and sat out by the fire, and it was great. So, and we plan on following that schedule through the winter, and then hopefully opening and expanding our hours in the spring.
And tell us how folks can order and
Yes.
tell me the whole shipping
Right.
process. And
So, a couple different options. You can order on our website. It's just www.finnriver.com. That's FINNRIVER.com. If you want to have it shipped to your home, that's the way to go. Everything I've talked about is available on the online store, and you can have it shipped to your home. But I'm also planning on doing some delivery days in the area. So if you want to forego shipping and have me bring it to your house, you can email me at Chelsea, that's CHELSEA, at finnriver.com. Let me know what you want, quantities, etc., and then we can work out delivery dates and whatnot. So both options. We do a $10 delivery fee if it's me, and then if it's shipping through USPS, it's USPS charges. It's like $50.
great. So
Are you going to have a deadline for
Oh yeah, that's a great
delivery
idea.
and shipping? What do you think?
Yeah,
What
I
do you
mean,
need?
our deadline should probably be this Sunday, so the 13th.
the
Yeah.
13th is your deadline for
Yeah.
shipping.
Yes.
And then how late into the holiday season, Chelsea, are you going to deliver?
Honestly, I'm pretty flexible on delivery dates. So, if you want your stuff before Christmas, which I generally think is probably the plan, I would say get your orders to me by the following week. So what is that? 7 days after the 13th?
The 20th.
Yes, the 20th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, gosh, I don't even know. Do you have a couple more questions?
No,
Or
I'm ready to drink.
I'm ready to. I know. Like she talks about an old fashioned and a highball and
yeah.
on the rocks with a lemon twist, and I'm just getting thirsty behind my
My
mask.
job. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free again to email me at chelsea@finnriver.com. That's all I got.
Chelsea at Finnriver.com or Finnriver.com for the website to go to. So, gosh, Chelsea, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.